Hey, Joseph Millar, thank you so much for doing this today, and looking forward to talking to you. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Holiday greetings.
Indeed, we are in that weird week between Christmas and New Year's. Did you do any kind of holiday travel, or did you stay home?
I went from the Bay Area down to Fresno to my oldest sons and came back to
Nice.
Richmond, where I live.
Yeah, and so you are in the Bay Area?
Yes.
How long have you lived there? I know you're originally from Western Pennsylvania, is that correct?
Yeah, I lived in the Bay Area for 30 years before I moved up to Oregon to get married and was in Oregon 10 years and in North Carolina 10 years teaching and both places. And then by years in the Bay Area, I was in the trades. I was a telephone installation foreman. And I went up north about the time I was putting the finishing touches on my first book, although it didn't come out for another three years or so. I started teaching up there, and then so 10 years there, 10 years in Carolina. We came back here full time in 2019 during COVID.
Ah, yeah.
And we've been here since then.
I think I read that.
So both of us from the Bay Area. My wife and the poet Dorianne, who's the poet Dorianne Laux, we met here.
Okay.
She got a job at the University of Oregon, and 3 years later, I went up there to be with her. So we both have wanted to come back to the Bay ever since we left, and we're lucky enough to be able to. So
Nice. And did I read that you spent some time as a commercial fisherman as well?
oh yeah, yeah. But in my younger days, yep, I did.
That's fascinating. Well, I'm going to put links in the show notes so people can find out a little bit about you. But as I mentioned to you earlier, I hope to get you on my longer podcast where we can talk a little more about your life. And I will ask you, I just want to ask you one question in particular, and then maybe ask you to read one of your poems. How old were you, Joe, when you first said to yourself, I'm going to be a poet. This is what I'm going to do?
Well, I started out wanting to be a novelist. And so I wrote stories. I was never able to sustain anything longer than a story, really. I wrote a couple little one-act plays. This was in the 60s. I wanted to be a novelist, but I could never think of a plot. And sometime around, I want to say 69, 68, 69, I wrote down, I couldn't think of anything. And I was looking out the window and I saw these birds walking around, and it was raining and they were close to the window. And I made a couple notes about that, just little lines, and then some notes about how I was feeling, which was a little hungover. And I showed it to this friend of mine, and he said, that's like a poem. And so that's when I started thinking, hey, this is what I can do. I could write good description, and I could write pretty good dialogue, but I could never think of a plot. I could never do that inhabiting a character that the good novelists are able to do. So so I would say, 24 years old by the time I go 23, 24, by the time I go, no, I'm going to write poems. I'm going to keep doing this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, several poets have said that to me, a very similar thing, that they at one time wanted to write in a longer form, and it took them a while to figure out, no, poetry. In fact, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Jane Hirschfield said that to me when I had her on my podcast. But would you do us a favor and read one of your poems? I mentioned to you that I really I've got this book of yours here, Shine, terrific book of poems, and I really like the Sacred Altar of Poetry. Would you mind reading that for us?
Well, I'll be glad to. Sacred Altar of Poetry. I like the night above the valley where the snow would pile up in winter and you could hear the crossing bells of the long trains heading west. I like the wee small hours of the morning, as Frank Sinatra would say, before the dawn slowly opens into the silence of day. Silence, the wellspring of happiness, which I won't raise my voice against. My voice, like a small twin-engine plane, lost in a cloud with no instruments. At twilight, I walk through the streets of town, through the wildfire smoke that kills all the smells, horchata and masa and guacamole, when I look through the windows of tarnished glass, trying to buy headache pills. Each night after supper, I take out the trash. Instead of making a song or an ode, I wash the dishes, wipe down the stove. If the muse were a whore, I'd give her the cash.
Yeah, man, I really like that poem. Thank you so much for reading that. I actually that I think we could probably connect that to Ruth Stone in some ways. Let's see. Let's get into Ruth Stone and talk about her a little bit. Let me start us by reading the poem Pokeberries. And I'm so glad you chose her, by the way. Um, eh, Ruth is she's one of those poets, I think you'll agree, that is surprisingly unknown, definitely underrated, but just a terrific poet. And so I'm really glad you chose her because I hope that our listeners will, if they aren't familiar with her work, will do themselves the favor of checking her out. She's just fantastic. I'm reading from a volume called The Essential Ruth Stone. The poem Pokeberries originally came from a book called Secondhand Coat, Poems New and Selected. So let me read the poem and then let's talk about it a little bit. Pokeberries. I started out in the Virginia mountains with my grandma's pansy bed and my Aunt Maud's dandelion wine. We lived on greens and back fat and biscuits. My Aunt Maud scrubbed right through the linoleum. My daddy was a northerner who played drums and chewed tobacco and gambled. He married my mama on the rebound. Who would want an ignorant hill girl with red hair? They took a Pullman up to Indianapolis, and someone stole my daddy's wallet. My whole life has been stained with pokeberries. No man seemed right for me. I was awkward until I found a good wood-burning stove. There's no use in asking what it means. There's no use in asking what it means. With my first piece of ready cash, I bought my own place in Vermont. Kerosene lamps, dirt road. I'm sticking here like a porcupine up a tree, like the one our neighbor shot. Its bones and skin hung there for 3 years in the orchard. No amount of knowledge can shake my grandma out of me, or my Aunt Maud, or my mama, who didn't just bite an apple with her big white teeth. She split it in two. Wow. Yeah. So Ruth Stone, 13 books, a lot of acclaim, a lot of awards. Born in 1915, died in 2011. Husband Walter committed suicide in 1959, which was obviously a huge thing in her life. She pretty much wrote about it for the rest of her life, and at the risk of sounding sort of insensitive, I think that experience probably made her a great poet, and in the sense that her poems, many of her poems came after that and were about that in one way or another. She taught at a lot of different colleges. The house she referred to is in Goshen, Vermont. Have you been to that house by chance?
No, I've not been there.
I'd love to go.
I've donated to the foundation.
Yeah.
And I know her daughter Bianca, but I've not been up there to the house.
Okay. We should meet there sometime. And anyone who is, if we haven't convinced you so far, hopefully we will, that you should check out Ruth Stone's poetry. But there's a beautiful little film called Ruth Stone's Vast Library of the Female Mind that's terrific. Before we talk about Pokeberries specifically, is there anything you would like to say about Ruth Stone in general?
Well, yeah, like I think she's a national treasure. I mean, she is. Uh, there's a poem called "Thoughts While Doing Laundry." You should look that up just for the sake of for your own edification. In case you think she's just somebody that can tell an amusing narrative about Ruth, she's brilliant.
Yeah.
She wrote plenty of poems that rhymed. You're right about when she lost her husband Walter. They were he was on a Rhodes, I think a Rhodes scholarship in England, and they had 3 daughters he left her with. So she was you're also right that he became her muse. I mean, she never remarried. I don't know if she ever had another serious relationship.
I don't think so.
It's not in any of the yeah, if she did, it was probably pretty secret and it probably didn't last long.
Yeah.
An ignorant hill girl with red hair. Ruth herself had red hair.
Right.
And was from much of what I know about her personally, I know from her student and friend Sharon Olds,
Yes.
who wrote the introduction to her new and selected poems, which would be the book to buy. It's a Copper Canyon. It's way bigger than that essential Ruth Stone that her daughter did. Sharon wrote the introduction to it, in which she describes going to her house, which was like a poetry shrine in a way, because when they would go there, they would all write, they'd all get some words, and everybody would use the same words, and they'd write poems, and everybody would contribute 1 word, and then they'd all write a poem out of that.
Yeah.
And the poetry game, which is a strategy my wife and I use with the writing groups. All the poems in Shine came out of this Monday writing group that had Sharon in it, as well as some others. And just Ruth was poetry in a way. And she nenever got a real tenure track job. Here she is with 3 kids.
She didn't
go to college. I think she graduated from somewhere, but I'm not sure about that.
Well, she definitely didn't have a PhD.
No,
Yeah,
no.
Yeah. Hey, let me try to fix my blinds again. Keep talking, please.
Yeah, she might have had a BA though from somewhere.
Yeah, maybe.
West Virginia, I mean, it's due south of Western Pennsylvania, so I know that Appalachian territory, and it's not particularly known for being literary, or they got a lot of banjo picking country singers around there, and that's the. But Ruth was, I mean, she had an ear for language and rhyme and sound. And she had the agile, nimble mind of the poet. I mean, she could leap around. She's not boring.
No.
No. She's but whereas so many poets of her generation and the generation afterwards, which includes me and my wife, so many of the poets in those generations were able to secure way less talented poets and teachers than she were able to secure tenure jobs somewhere where they could have a house, raise their kids in relative, stability. And she was always on the move from one school to the next, visiting professor here for a year or 2, and on to the next thing. Sharon finally, I think, helped her land a job at Humboldt, or not Humboldt, Hunter. I think I'm looking in here to see what Sharon finally helped her up onto the wagon. but way late in life when her kids are mostly grown.
Right.
And
Right.
and all during that time she dealt with scarcity.
Yes.
Uh, the first piece of ready cash she talks about it. She bought a wood burning stove. She bought that little house. I,
Right.
I can't remember. Maybe it was a Guggenheim. I don't remember what it was she won.
Maybe. I know she also won the Wallace Stevens Award, which came with
Oh,
a.
that's at the very end of her life.
Oh,
She got
that's right.
recognized at the very end of her life by the National Book Award Committee, on which my wife served,
Gotcha.
and they voted her the National Book Award, which she won. And then later in the year, somehow the people who sit the chancellors of the Academy of American Poets voted her the Wallace Stevens Award, which, unlike a lot of people who win it, she really needed.
Yeah.
The National Book Award, there's not that big of a cash prize. I mean, she just was like overlooked, and I don't know why. Well, she probably wasn't very good at schmoozing.
Right. She didn't promote herself very
She
well.
didn't promote herself. She was up there in the woods,
Yeah.
and uh, I loved everything about her. You know, I got somebody, I think Sharon gave her a copy of my first book, Overtime, which I heard that she liked, and I was just like, oh my God, that's one of my heroes.
Yeah.
Likes my book. Holy shit. You know, I just thought it was great.
That's
Uh,
fantastic.
so, uh, and it's because of the level of realness of her writing that that I say that, because that's the real thing. The other thing is, of course, her great talent. I mean, she's like, what is it? The something or other, or the vast something or vast something library of the
Ruth
female,
Stone, vast library of the female mind.
the vast library of the female mind. I mean, she's a total feminist
Yeah.
in a very subtle, quiet way.
Yeah.
Her little digs at the world that she suffered through, people dismissing her intelligence and her ability. When she gets back at them in her poems here and there, it's always gentle, but she's not afraid to stick the needle in. And
Right.
if you get to know her work, you'll love how she does that. You know, she's not on a soapbox. She's just quietly brilliant. Um, this poem,
Let me just quickly
yeah,
say that's probably another reason she wasn't that well known, because she not only did she not promote herself, uh, she probably didn't play the game with the men who were
yeah,
very much in charge at the time, right?
yeah,
She wasn't going to play that game. I love one of the things I love about her, Joe, is there's that deep sadness. It comes through. I mean, it's just painful. At the same time, humor.
yeah,
Uh, I love, for example, there's a poem. I don't recall what the title of this one is, but she's talking to her dead husband, talking
yeah.
about things that happened. The last line is, "See what you missed by being dead."
Being dead. See what you- That's the
Wow.
one where the landlord come, Mr.
Oh
Tempesta.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
great
She
one.
comes running out naked to get rid of the fire inspector. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I become my Aunt Virginia, something but weak in the head. I become Anna Magnani, and then remember that time. I mean, she's so changeable from line to line. Is the other thing. You don't let down in a Ruth Stone poem like this poem. You don't let down in it from line to line. That the reader's attention is
Yes.
held. You fasten on to her.
Yeah.
She's so great in that way.
And she's so unique. I people have compared her to Emily Dickinson. I don't understand that. I don't see that at
No,
all.
me
I don't
neither.
know who I would compare her to. She seems
I,
fairly
I don't
unique.
know anybody. Yeah, I don't know anybody to compare her to. She's a national treasure. She's a home run hitter.
Yeah.
And this in our culture didn't completely pass over her, but she should have been front row.
Yeah.
She should have been up there with Louise Gluck. She should have been right up there with the people that everybody knows about.
Yeah.
But she didn't. She didn't.
Elizabeth Bishop, for example. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like absolutely. She's as good as Elizabeth Bishop.
Absolutely.
Damn right. and much more various, much more, many more different kinds of moves,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
so
It's so charming. So what about this poem, Pokeberries? So let me just ask you maybe why, of all the fantastic poems we could have chosen, what drew you to Pokeberries to choose to talk about today?
well, yeah, that's good. And I got what, about 10 minutes here or something to
Yeah,
talk about?
we can take a little more time, but about 10 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to do line by line, but I'll go a little bit line by line.
Good.
One of
Good.
the general things about the poem is that it's a poem of identity. Okay, that's so quite often when we begin writing, although this appeared in a later book, but quite often a person's first book and first poems will be about where they came from. These are my people. This is what it was like where I grew up. This is my home turf. This is my story. And this is when we teach that or assign a poem like that to be written by students, we quite often use this one as a sample along with a few other poems. Um, there's a Young Lee poem or two that we use, but Pokeberries is right at the top, and uh, there's some kind of I used to know what the hell they were. You know, it's not something you can eat. I can't remember what they were, what they are, but there's some wild fruit that grows in the woods.
And I think they're poisonous.
Yeah, they are. They're poisonous, and so what she says about them is that I started out in the Virginia mountains with my grandma's pansy bed and my Aunt Maud's dandelion wine. So it's it's nature in the Appalachians.
Yeah.
And Aunt Maud, we get to know her right away. And this is a wonderful feminist poem in its quiet way. Uh, we lived on greens and back fat and biscuits. All of her stuff is always authentic. That's
Yeah.
the stuff, and they lived on that.
You bet.
My Aunt Maud scrubbed right through the linoleum. These are simple declarative sentences, right? Back to back. We lived on greens and back fat and biscuits, period. My Aunt Maud scrubbed right through the linoleum, period. Those are not only sentences, they're lines. Okay, so when you're reading down through the poem, you pause at the end of each thing. Each detail she gives you is like, okay, you want to know who I am? This is it. And, my grandma's pansy bed, my Aunt Maud's dandelion wine. And this is my Aunt Maud. And then she goes to, so there's two declarative sentences. This is a sentence that she breaks into lines. My daddy was a northerner who played drums and chewed tobacco and gambled. Okay, two lines. My daddy was a northerner who played drums and chewed tobacco and gambled. There's a great kind of beat to that. So much of this free verse we think of as being just like ramble, scamble sentences broken into lines. Poetry's language highly charged with meaning. Okay, you got two sentences about her daddy, and you see that he was kind of a slightly shady character from a different part of the world, and he was a gambler.
He was a shit.
Yeah, he was a northerner who played drums and chewed tobacco and gambled, and also kind of fascinating cat. You're
Right.
kind of like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
And then he married my mama on the rebound. Period. And then a question: who would want an ignorant hill girl with red hair? Obviously, just some shady character like this that has no roots really anywhere and is a sort of fly by night himself, and he marries an ignorant hill girl with red hair. And of course, if she's reading this poem, you're seeing her up there with her West Virginia voice, and she got red hair.
Right.
They took a Pullman up to Indianapolis, and someone stole my daddy's wallet. Okay, we've gone from the question we break the format of the of the lines as we go down with a question, and then we break it again with an actual narrative statement. It could have been written by a fiction writer. Absolutely. They took a Pullman up to Indianapolis. Nice L's in there, though. And someone stole my daddy's wallet. Period. And then back to the universal. My whole life has been stained with pokeberries. You know,
Have you noticed that that line is the exact center of this poem? I believe there's 10, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's 11 lines before it and 11 lines after it. It's
no, I did. So that's the 12th line, and then there's 11 more lines.
Correct.
Well, that's
yeah.
awesome. I never have noticed that. No man seemed right for me. I was awkward until I found a good wood burning stove. Now that's a kind of Ruth Stone connection that not everybody would make. You'd say I was awkward until this or until that, but usually a wood burning stove is not going to take away a person's awkwardness.
Yeah.
But it worked for her.
Yeah.
There is no use asking what it means. She says this over and over again in her poems. She says there's no use asking what it means. I love that so much because I totally agree with that. There's you don't know what it means when you're writing a poem. If you know what it means when you're writing a poem, the poem's going to suck. I mean, it just is, because you're not going to be surprised by it, and the reader's not going to be surprised by it. As Robert Frost says, no surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader.
Yeah.
So she's going, there's no use asking what it means. That her whole life's been stained with pokeberries, that no man seemed right for me. I was awkward until I found a good wood burning stove. There's no use asking what it means. Then we go back to the narrative with my first. So in there you have a little personal reflection about the life being stained with pokeberries, no man seeming right, awkwardness, the wood burning stove, and the general thing of there's no use asking what it means. And then she goes back to a narrative. With my first piece of ready cash, I bought my own place in Vermont, kerosene lamps, dirt road. I'm sticking here like a porcupine up a tree, period. Like the one our neighbors shot, period. Its bones and skin hung there for 3 years in the orchard. That's a great enjambment. Like the one our neighbors shot, its bones and skin, line break, hung there for 3 years in the orchard. It's like that backwoods type of shit where nobody's going to clear it out, right? It's like being picked clean by the insects and birds.
And not only is she stubbornly going to stick to her place down that road, even at the point of just being bones and skin, she's still hanging in.
Yeah. It's great, huh? Like the one our neighbors shot, its bones and skin hung there for 3 years in the orchard. And then I just love this.
Yeah.
No amount of knowledge can shake my grandma out of me. You want to see a feminist ending?
Yeah.
Or my Aunt Maud, or my mama, who didn't just bite an apple, but a little resonance of Eve here.
Absolutely.
With her big white teeth, she split it in two. So the whole image of Eve and the apple is like, no, it's not an apple with a little bite out of it, like Apple Computer. It's two halves.
Yeah.
Just a tour de force of an identity poem. And it shows so much of her general ars poetica. It's no use asking what it means. This is what happened. I mean, no man seemed right for me, which is right. After she lost Walter, no man did seem right for her. The wood burning stove, the house, the porcupine, and then this along with no man seemed right for me. No amount of knowledge can shake my grandma out of me, or my Aunt Maud, or my mama, who didn't just bite an apple with her big white teeth. she split it in two. You know, that's Ruth Stone.
Yep.
She's super bad. You know, you do yourself a great favor to get this book, What Love Comes To. I don't know if you can read it, but it's Copper Canyon publication, easy enough to get, still in print. She's down here as a Pulitzer Prize finalist. Ruth Stone should have won the Pulitzer Prize for any number of years.
Yep.
You know, any number of years
Yep.
that she was writing. But she didn't got. You know, people won the Ruth Stone prize. They couldn't carry her brassiere, as you know, seriously. And but you know, that's how it is in the world. I mean, it's a good art goes begging a lot of times, and in her case, she persevered and managed a life of poetry. I can't recommend her highly enough. She's a national treasure. If you don't know her work, you want to. Yeah.
Joe, thank you so much for doing this. So I know you pretty much just went through it line by line, but would you do me a favor and read it again to take us out here?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Pokeberries. I started out in the Virginia mountains with my grandma's pansy bed and my Aunt Maud's dandelion wine. We lived on greens and back fat and biscuits. My Aunt Maud scrubbed right through the linoleum. My daddy was a northerner who played drums and chewed tobacco and gambled. He married my mama on the rebound. Who would want an ignorant hill girl with red hair? They took a Pullman up to Indianapolis, and someone stole my daddy's wallet. My whole life has been stained with pokeberries. No man seemed right for me. I was awkward until I found a good wood-burning stove. There is no use asking what it means. With my first piece of ready cash, I bought my own place in Vermont, kerosene lamps, dirt road. I'm sticking here like a porcupine up a tree, like the one our neighbor shot. Its bones and skin hung there for 3 years in the orchard. No amount of knowledge can shake my grandma out of me, or my Aunt Maud, or my mama, who didn't just bite an apple with her big white teeth. She split it in two. Ruth Stone.
Beautiful, beautiful. Joseph Millar, thank you so much for doing this. Let's stay in touch. I would really like to get you on my other podcast to spend a little more time and talk more about you and your own poetry, if you were up for that.
Yep, that's convenient. Of course, be glad to. Shine is a pretty new book. It came out, last fall, so I'll be glad to talk.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
Joe, thank you so much. Take care.
All right, John. Same to you. Bye.